in this, that regardless of what words might be spoken, there would be no particular benefit unless at the same time there was an actual realized presence of God. In other words, the mere form of the message that comes through is not the important part of our meeting. And in the same way, when you meet to hear the tapes, it isn't of too much importance which message you hear. The importance will be the degree of realized Christ, of realized God, and this must take place within your consciousness. Now, this brings up this morning another very important part of our work. Why are we really here? Why are we meeting here these Sunday mornings? Or what is the real purpose of your coming together in a class or hearing the classes? And on this point, you should be very, very certain. The reason that we come together is to experience God. That is our function. We should never meet except for the specific purpose of experiencing God, of having a spiritual realization. Because where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. In thy presence is fullness, fulfillment. And so anything less than the actual presence of God will not serve our particular purpose. Merely to know another approach to truth will not do the work for us. It is true that we are fortunate in having the message of the infinite way as it has come through for this reason. The earlier writings and teachings on metaphysical and spiritual healing all came through in the earliest days of the revelation, and at a time when the mental and the spiritual had not been separated, had not been realized as two different states of consciousness, and also when certain principles were taught which to the pioneers seemed right and which later proved wrong. We've had the opportunity not only of witnessing all that has taken place in these last 90 to 100 years, witnessing that which is and that which is not. We have also had the benefit of the 16 years of actual spiritual healing practice that I had before our first book was written, and the 15 years that have gone by since then. So that with our books it should be easier to attain a spiritual consciousness and the realization of God than would otherwise be the case. But do not be fooled by this. There is enough truth in every one of the metaphysical movements that are now on earth, I mean the major ones, for anyone, if they catch the message that's in them, to attain spiritual consciousness. And it is not the message that does the great works, it is the attainment of the spiritual consciousness that does it. I merely say that we have an easier time attaining it because of the nature of our writings. But it has been possible and is possible to attain it through any of the major textbooks that are available. Now, if you realize then that the reason for your study of the writings, the reason for your hearing of the tapes, the reason for your attending classes, the reason for our being here on Sunday mornings is the attainment, the deeper and richer attainment of God awareness, you will have an easier approach to your daily living. Because once you perceive this point, you will know why you meditate. You will know why it is important that you start out your day before engaging in the world's activities with a period of meditation. And the reason is this: God realization, the attainment of spiritual realization. Let us see how this operates in our lives. You hear the statement too often, nothing is impossible to God. And usually those that voice it mean, well, then we just let God do all of this for us, and since nothing's impossible to God, we have nothing further to do. And you see, thereby much demonstration is lost. Because it is true that nothing is impossible to God. That part of it is perfectly true. But that is not going to be of any help to you or to me, the fact that nothing is impossible to God, except in proportion as we can bring the presence of God into actual realization. In other words, it isn't the infinite all nature of God that makes our demonstration. It is the degree of our realization of that presence of God. There was just as much God in the world before the days of Jesus Christ. There was just as much of God in the world before the days of Moses. But what good did that all power of God do to the Hebrews until there was a Moses to lead them out of their slavery? What good was all of this infinite power of God until there was a Jesus to heal the sick and raise the dead and to feed the hungry? Spiritual healing was as possible to the world throughout all of the past 5,000 years as it is today. But of what avail was that to the world until Mrs. Eddy first revealed to us and to the world that the presence of God is as available in this age as it was on the shores of Galilee. In other words, the fact of God is not the important thing in the lives of men and women. It is true that God is, and that God is infinite and all power, and nothing is impossible to God. This is true. But remember this, that just as in the days of old, only men like Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, Jesus, John, Paul, only those who attained the actual realization and demonstration of God were able to do these mighty works of spiritual regeneration, spiritual healing, and spiritual supply. And this condition exists today, and it always has since the reintroduction of spiritual healing and spiritual living, that there have been and there are now some of higher attained spiritual awareness than others, and thereby there are those who are doing greater works than others. Now remember, the power of God is the same, and therefore the difference in demonstration is the difference in the degree of attained God realization. Once you know this, you will know that harmony in your individual life and in the life of your family or your students, when you get to that point of having students, the harmony in their experience and yours is going to be in direct proportion to the degree of your attainment of spiritual harmony. I have witnessed this in these more than 30 years, that there are some homes, many homes, that are kept wonderfully free of the discords and diseases and disasters of the world, not always completely without some problems coming in, but on the whole beautifully free of the world's discords and inharmonies, because there is a mother in the family devoting herself to spiritual awareness, or in some homes there may be even a mother and a father, and where this is true, you find that household comparatively free of the disasters, the destructions, the discords and inharmonies of this world. Do not forget that this cannot be 100% demonstrated, for the simple reason that we have not attained 100% of God awareness, and to some extent the members of our household, just like the members of our student body, have their own responsibilities. No one can carry another wholly into heaven. One member of a family can do wonders for their entire family, but they cannot maintain complete freedom from discord, for the simple reason that every individual has a responsibility toward their own spiritual development, and you cannot usurp that. You cannot take from them the privilege of going their materialistic way if that is the way they wish to go. You cannot take away from them the individual expression of their own lives, even when their lives differ from the spiritual. And therefore, do not believe for a moment that you can guarantee complete immunity from discord to all of the members of your household, because you cannot. But you certainly can assure that probably the major disasters and destructions of life will not come nigh your household. And certainly, in a great measure, you can keep yourself free. Now, the measure of this freedom from world discord is proportionate to your attainment and the degree of your attainment of God realization. And as you know, meditation is the most important factor in the development of that consciousness, and especially when that meditation is backed up with your understanding of the nature of these principles. And I want to illustrate that for you. If you go into meditation with the idea that you are going to bring God to the destruction of sin or disease or lack or limitation, you are going to set up a barrier and prevent the very thing you are hoping for. And so it is that in approaching meditation, you must realize this. Evil, regardless of its form, does not exist as a power. It does not exist as an entity or a force. Evil, whether it's in the form of sin or disease or lack or unemployment or wars or threats of wars, exists only in the same nature that darkness exists. Darkness is not an entity that goes somewhere when light is admitted to a room. Darkness doesn't go anyplace because actually there is no such thing as darkness. Nobody has ever seen darkness. Nobody has ever felt it. Nobody can analyze it because there is no entity called darkness. Darkness is merely an absence of light. The moment light appears, there is no darkness. But darkness did not go anyplace. It hasn't moved out of the room. It wasn't in the room. There wasn't any it. There was merely an absence of light. As you perceive this, you understand the function of meditation and spiritual healing. Meditation has for its purpose admitting the light which is God, letting loose the light that is within you, releasing the light that is stored up within you. The kingdom of God, that is spiritual light, is within you. And we must open out a way for the imprisoned splendor, light, to escape. Therefore, meditation has nothing to do with overcoming sin or disease or lack or unemployment. meditation has nothing to do with stopping evil men from continuing their evil practices. Meditation has to do with you as an individual realizing and releasing the light that is within you. In the attainment of that, the darkness disappears. And the darkness is any and every form of human discord. The darkness and its forms vanish the very moment light is introduced. In other words, we do not know how to heal disease, but we do know how to sit and realize the impotent nature of anything other than God's presence. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it were given thee of God. There is no power to darkness. There is no power to the forms in which darkness appears. Sin or disease or lack. So therefore, we are not here to fight these. We are not here to overcome these. We are not here to destroy any of the evils of this world. We are here that I may realize that I and my Father are one. That where I am, God is. And that because of God's presence, there is peace, harmony, wholeness, completeness. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. For in the presence of God there is the light of truth. Thy presence is my sufficiency in all things. Thy presence, thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. To know God aright is life eternal. To realize God is to realize freedom, complete release from fear. In thy presence is fulfillment. And I am here in meditation to realize this truth and to be a transparency so that the kingdom of God within me may be released in consciousness, thereby dispelling every appearance of darkness, every appearance of discord, inharmony. If I realize and feel the presence of God, everyone in this room receptive and responsive to God feels it and feels the effects of it. Every time that you in your home attain in meditation an awareness, a feeling of God's presence, You have released the light into your home, and you will find there are no dark places there anymore, no hidden errors, no sins, no diseases, no lacks. For where there is light, darkness does not abide. Where there is spirit, there can be no forms of mortality. Thy presence is my sufficiency, thy grace, the realization of thy presence. I in thee and thou in me, like every branch of the tree, one. I have meat the world knows not of. I have within me this realization of God. I have within me this realization of a divine presence, of a spiritual light. And this is my bread and my meat and my wine and my water. This is the law unto my life. This is the presence that goes before me to make the crooked places straight. I need not voice it. In fact, I must not voice it. Pray in secret, and the Father that seeth in secret will reward thee openly. In secret, realize God's grace, God's presence. In secret, realize the spiritual nature of the function of God. And then, in proportion as you feel an inner awareness, an inner release, an inner confidence, you can be assured that you have attained some measure of light, of spiritual light. And then you go about your daily tasks, whatever their name or nature may be, and leave the rest to that realized presence of God. Now, because of the nature of what we call this world that we're living in, we have been told by the Master to be in the world, but not of it. And so this means that unless you were a few hours later to sit down again for a meditation, you would soon find that you were again embroiled in this world and its fears and its discords. Just a couple of days ago, something came to my attention, I think it was in a paper, that bore witness to the evil nature of some of these men that are manipulating the world. And for a moment it brought a sense of inner disturbance, and almost at the same moment the voice spoke and said, but there aren't any evil men. Man is spiritual. And there was a complete release from being in the world, or being of the world, of being under the influence of its fears and its worries. And you may ask, Did that remove these evil men from the world? No, merely from my world and from the world of those who are attuned to my consciousness. It definitely took them and any effect that they might have from my consciousness and from the consciousness of those who are attuned to my consciousness, and I can only be responsible for my own state of consciousness. So with you, you need not ask the members of your family to believe in spiritual healing or spiritual living. You need not try to sell them on the idea of what benefits they could receive from it. It is far better to accept responsibility for your own state of consciousness and leave the rest of your household to work out their unfoldment. And if they are to be brought to this, rather by your example than by your preaching. This does not, however, extend to the children of our household, for remember that we are responsible. By having children, we have accepted the responsibility for their care, their instruction, their government, until they have reached the age when they may go off and live their own lives. But remember, they usually will go off and live their own lives in accordance with what they have received, primarily in their homes. Now, your function in your morning meditation and at the other meditations during the day or night will be the realization of God's presence. Remembering this, you do not have problems to overcome. You only have to attain the realization of God's presence, and it, by being the light, will dispel the darkness. And not dispel it by overcoming it or destroying it, but by proving that in the presence of light there is no darkness. And you will demonstrate that in the presence of God there is fulfillment. There is no sin, no disease, no lack, no unemployment, no war in the presence of God. And if you were at the very battlefront, there would be no war for you in the presence of God realized. Now, your only responsibility at this stage of your unfoldment is the development of your own spiritual consciousness. At first, this may seem a bit selfish to leave the rest of the world alone and concern yourself only with the development of your own consciousness. But you will find that this particular form of selfishness is the height of unselfishness, because once you attain some measure of God realization, then the world will be the pathway to your door and really be benefited by the degree of consciousness that you have attained. No one can be benefited by coming to you as a human being. I mean benefited spiritually. They can only be benefited by coming to you in the degree of your attained spiritual realization. And therefore, it is the height of unselfishness to let the world alone temporarily while you study, meditate, attain a measure of Christ realization, and then every time a call is made upon you, answer it and fulfill yourself. Answer it. Do not have the fear that you do not yet understand enough, or that you haven't enough spiritual power, because there never will come a time when you understand enough. And there never will come a time when you have spiritual power. All that you can do in your most advanced state is what you can do in your beginning state, and that is, let the light dispel the darkness. Let there be light, and there was light. Let there be God, and God functions. The presence of God goes before you. So, when called upon, when you observe discords and inharmonies in your home, this is an opportunity to begin your practice. And your practice consists of meditating until you feel that presence of God, and then let it perform its functions. So eventually, as the light dawns more and more in your consciousness, you will find that others will come to you. At first it'll be a miracle how they even knew that you were interested in spiritual things. I think this always puzzles us, how people discern without even knowing. And as they come, do not send them away. Accept the responsibility. If God sent this individual to me, then it is only that God may respond. And so I will meditate. And your whole responsibility is to feel that inner assurance of God's presence and let it perform the work. Always remember, you are not responsible for saving somebody's life. You are not responsible for healing somebody, for you do not have this capacity, nor does anyone else. But you do have the responsibility for being in this world, but not of it. You do have the responsibility of retiring several times a day for your meditation, for the realization of God's grace as your sufficiency, as God's presence, as the light which dispels the darkness. And then abiding in your meditation until you feel this presence, and then let it perform its work. You are not trying to reform people. You are not trying to heal people. You are not trying to change the conditions of this world. You are sitting in meditation to attain the realization of God's grace, of God's presence. That is your only function, and in proportion as you succeed, you will witness how the darkness evaporates out of your life, out of your household, out of the experience of the members of your household. And then gradually, how this darkness is dispelled in the experience of those who come to you. But let us not go back to at least to some of the principles of the earlier days of the metaphysical teachings. Do not let us go back to what has not been successful, and let us work toward the higher revealed principles and unfoldments or revelations. Just as an illustration, in the very earliest days of metaphysical teachings, there was a teaching to the effect that rheumatism was caused by this state of consciousness or another. Cancer was caused in people who hated or who were jealous, and all of that kind of thing. Every physical disease had a mental cause. Well, now I must tell you that within the first 5 years of Mrs. Eddy's own practice, she discovered that these principles were entirely erroneous. And she recalled every one of the lists that she had given out to her students with these mental causes for physical diseases. And unfortunately, one of her major students refused to give up his list, and he has perpetuated in his teachings, which are widespread, this very teaching of a mental cause for a physical disease. The result of that is that this list got into all of the other metaphysical movements that came later, Unity and New Thought, and as a matter of fact, they are now included in the teachings of psychology. And yet, as long ago as 1880, they were proven to be erroneous, fallacious. Yet they persist to a great extent in the metaphysical and psychological consciousness of the world. Now, should you ever be tempted to go back to such erroneous practices and beliefs, try to understand that they never were successful, aren't successful now, and none of the movements founded on them were successful. And then you will know that you had best eliminate anything and everything of such a nature. You see, evil does not have its existence in the consciousness of any individual. Nobody causes their own problems except in one way, and that is through ignorance of truth. Every problem that we have in our experience is the degree of our ignorance of truth. In other words, evil has a universal source, what Paul called the carnal mind, or Mrs. Eddy called mortal mind, human consciousness, any name you want to give it. But it is absolutely impersonal, and therefore the very first principle that started the message of the infinite way was this one: that evil does not have its rise in you. Later it was also discovered in this message that evil does not have its rise in God, and all of the religious teachings of centuries that God is responsible for acts of evil, for the diseases or the deaths of human beings, that God calls home human beings. All of this has been outlawed in the message of the infinite way, every bit of it, because it has come as direct revelation that no evil has its rise in God. God is not responsible for any of the evils that have befallen mankind. And then secondarily, neither does evil have its rise in individual you or me. All evil has its source in the universal belief in two powers, in the universal belief that we are a selfhood apart from God, in the universal belief that there are laws other than spiritual laws, the laws of God. In the degree, then, that you begin to purge yourself of the belief that any of the evils in your life or human life emanate from God, as you go a step further and realize that none of the discords of life have their rise in man whose breath is in his nostril, but that every evil of any form, of any nature, even tidal waves, even winter storms, all of these things have their rise in the carnal mind, which is merely a belief in two powers. Without a belief in two powers, nothing could ever be destructive. Nothing could ever be harmful. Nothing could ever be painful. And so we have as the basic source of all evil the universal belief in two powers, this constituting the mesmeric suggestion or mesmeric mind or mesmeric belief that in the end manifests itself in our bodies and in our business and in our affairs. Once you turn in meditation and realize evil does not have its source in God, evil does not have its source in man, evil, the darkness, is really made up of a belief in two powers. And this belief has no law of God to sustain it. It has no divine authority. Therefore, it is without form and void. And then turn within. Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. When thou utterest thy voice, the earth melts. Therefore, in this meditation, I am a transparency. That thy will may be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now listen to that one. Just listen to that one. That thy will may be done on earth as it is in heaven. That thy will, and remember we've just acknowledged that thy will does not include acts of destruction, sin, disease, death. That thy will. Do you want to know what God's will is? Read the Gospels and see why Jesus came to earth, what his mission was, and the source of his mission. And you will find that the will of God is that you be healed, that you be enriched, that you be fed, that you be raised from the dead, that you be enlightened. That was why he came to earth. That's why he gave this message. I am come that ye might have life, and that ye might have life more abundantly. And this is the will of God. Therefore, when we pray that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we mean that health, wholeness, harmony, peace, abundance, all of these be made manifest on earth as they are in spiritual reality, as they are in the kingdom of God within me. As Browning says, there is a center within each one of us in which is complete harmony, complete spiritual rest and peace, a complete Sabbath from this world. There is that center within each of us, and in our meditation eventually we reach it, and we actually sit in that center within our own being. We sit there in an eternal peace, in a divine state of peace, and the storms of this world do not enter there. And we are praying that this eternal peace at the center of our being, this eternal harmony, wholeness, completeness, perfection, be now made manifest on earth as it is within me. And therefore, if I have within me this center of divine peace and rest and Sabbath, and I meditate, it is only that I may be still and let this imprisoned splendor escape, so that you may feel the divine presence and power that is at the center of my being, and which I have realized. This, in turn, reveals to you, since it is true that God is no respecter of persons, that this same divine center is at the center of your being, and you can retire from the world in a meditation, be separate and apart from the world, be in the world, but not of it, and finally realize that you too have meat that the world knows not of. You too have this center where peace is enshrined. You too have this inner center of light. And therefore, it is possible for you to open out a way for that imprisoned light to escape. And as you do, be assured, the storms out here begin to subside. They may at first be only the storms that are in your own mind and body. Later, they will be the storms that are in your household and in the members of your family. And then later, you will draw to you those to whom you can give the same light. Do not be discouraged if you cannot benefit all whom you would like to benefit, because you must remember that there must be some degree of spiritual receptivity and responsiveness in those who you help. Usually the mere fact that they will ask for it indicates that they have that degree of spiritual receptivity. But my mail shows how many people there are writing to me to please take up work for Jones Brown Smith somewhere, who isn't interested in spiritual truth and is in a hospital or is receiving medical aid, but they deserve to be well. Oh, they are a loving mother or a loving father, and they deserve to be well. As if we could go around entering the household of anybody and everybody who is sick. We can't. But surely we can bring some measure of light to everyone, open, receptive, and responsive to it. And that is our responsibility. Eventually, by this light, you will find that more and more in the world are receptive to it. And that is the reason we have every reason to believe and to hope that we are rapidly approaching the age of harmony in world affairs. Don't anymore be discouraged by the day-to-day news than eventually you will be when healing the sick or treating the sick and finding that for a while they get worse or that they don't improve. You will come to see that that is no cause for discouragement as long as you are doing faithfully the work that is yours, and that your patient or student is faithfully doing theirs, because all healing work does not evolve in the same way. Very often, healings do not take place until some specific truth has been realized or some specific discord or other has been removed from our consciousness before the harmony can appear on the body. In other words, never judge by appearances. All you are responsible for is the degree of your meditation, your attaining God realization, and then the government is on its shoulder to perform its work in its way. Just as when the Master says to the woman taken in adultery, "Neither do I condemn thee, but go and sin no more." In other words, my responsibility only goes to bringing about this immediate release. Your responsibility lies in attaining the higher consciousness that will prevent this recurring. So it is then that as we come together in any or every phase of our work, let us realize this, that deep at the center of our being there is this enthroned Christ, the light of the world. Within me, within you, there is this light of the world, that which can save the world. The Savior of mankind is enthroned within you. And you are going into meditation for the purpose of being still and realizing, I have meat the world knows not of. And in this meditation, this light, this meat, is to be released. And go out into this human consciousness as light, dispelling darkness. And so now we'll have a period of meditation for that purpose. And you will notice how that everything connected with us, with our room, with our tape, everything will carry forward. I'm trying to think of that Bible passage, that even if I didn't speak, the very stones would cry out. And so it is that even though we do not humanly voice this truth, even though we sit in silence, the very walls will emanate light, give light and comfort and healing. The very robe that the Master wears will carry healing power. And so our meditation now.